number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa, science advisor Matt Moniz, and guest John Brightman and Melody Knapp tonight here on the Spooky Crew. We've got a full slate, people all across the table, and we have a lot of topics that we can talk about. Dealing with the paranormal, we'll also take your calls, 508-996-0500. 877-996-1420 if you want to call in as well. And you can join in the discussion in the chat room on SpookySouthCoast.com and on our YouTube channel. And you can also do it on your app as well. If you have an Android or an iPhone, you can download it. Matt, what's going to happen with the Google phone? That's going to use the Android apps, right? Hold on. I haven't put the mics up yet. I'm so unprofessional.
With the, I put it up way
too high.
The Google Pixel?
Yeah, those Google phones.
Those
run Android, right?
Yeah.
Android apps?
Yep. It'll be the same.
Okay.
Just you're kind of out of luck if you have a Windows phone. Sorry.
Well, are they still making those? Do they?
They do.
Okay. And there's
I don't know. The expert.
I would say you're out of luck if you have a Windows phone.
That's true. But if you have a Windows phone, you can just use your Windows phone to go to YouTube and watch us there, and you don't have to have the app for that.
Windows Play Store has nothing.
Well, we have Android and iPhone covered, so you can.
Those are the two most important.
That's all that matters.
Google and Apple is like where.
And we should have an update soon.
An update?
An update, maybe.
Do we want to give away any secrets of what could be coming in the update?
A back button.
Do you understand how
iPhone.
important that is?
Well, Android, we have a back button.
Right, you can just hit the back button because we have regular, normal phones. We know what we're. Yeah, well,
just hit the back button.
Although I don't want to ruin this for you.
Yep, I know it's one button. It's gonna be one button.
They're getting rid of all that stuff. Yeah,
I can't deal.
The S8 stuff is not making me happy. Getting rid of the headphone jack, getting rid of that.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Trying to be like iPhone.
Yep.
Oh.
iPhone's already done it.
So what's going to happen to us stupid people that don't know how to use phones correctly and on,
you can still use your rotary phone.
I can help you.
People said that when they going from the Nokia to BlackBerry.
You're talking to somebody that Stephanie just got to start using Twitter. Okay, I never used Twitter. I didn't even have a business fan page set up, and Stephanie finally got me to do that. So I'm a little behind in the times here.
It's all right. You'll catch up.
Getting the.
That's a good opportunity to give out your Twitter handle.
Yes, what is your Twitter handle? Let everybody know. He's like,
Bright,
I don't
Bright
know.
Star Promo.
All right.
At Bright Star
Makes
Promo.
more than phone calls now.
BRITE. Holy crap! Moni's upgraded his flip phone.
I actually thought he was going to pull a pigeon out of his.
Hey, I still use smoke signals at home.
So now that you have that, you can actually use apps because that's not the work. That's your personal phone.
That is correct.
All right. So now when people, because God love her, Christina, she's a big fan, a big supporter, a good friend. And whenever she tweets out anything about the show, she always includes your Twitter. And I want to tell her, he's got no idea. He doesn't even know how to use Twitter.
I have a Twitter.
You do. You have a Twitter.
You tweeted once.
So now you're going to have to use it.
Actually, I didn't. You guys set up, I guess, the Twitter and tweeted for me?
Before you leave, we will actually make sure that you are signed into that Twitter, and you can tweet things. And you can just mess around with it.
Oh, fine. Give me a responsibility. Thanks.
But, hey, people want to talk to you, man. Spooky South Coast listeners want to interact with you. You keep your Facebook personal, which is your right to do so. We made you a public page for your Facebook, but you don't use it.
I'm not really a social media person.
But you're in a position where people want to be social with you. So you have to be able to interact. I'm tired of people sending me things and me like, ask Moniz what he thinks about it. No, you ask Moniz what he thinks about it. I don't even have time to talk to Moniz about important things. Well, not that what listeners are asking for isn't important, but you know what I mean. He called me yesterday, and I was like, I'm sorry, I can't take the call. I'm at work, and it's crazy when I'm working, so it's hectic. I'm like, I can text, that's.
Yeah, your schedule is kind of random.
Well, no, now that I'm here all the time, it's like I got to do news every half an hour.
Okay.
So it's like it takes 5 minutes to do the news, and then that leaves me 25 minutes to build the next newscast. And I got to go in and find all the stuff that's going on, make phone calls. It's pretty hectic. So don't think that I'm rude if I don't answer your calls in the afternoons. But I do want to say, getting back to the topic about UFO sightings here, before we get into the meat and potatoes of talking about UFO sightings in this area, Moniz, to take a step back and talk about Bigfoot,
yep.
You're actually collecting some reports, which your social media can help you with. Because let me just tell you what's happening here. You put out on your Facebook that you are looking for Bigfoot sighting reports. However, your Facebook is on lockdown.
Yeah.
And you're very selective about who you let onto it. So you're not reaching a wide enough audience.
Requests. And at least for my personal page, usually to get on my list of my personal page, you have to walk up to me physically, personally, tell me you're putting in a request, and then you're obviously going to be the first person up on the top of the list.
Which is why you're not connecting with anybody from your past, which is probably how you prefer it.
I have relatives I probably have in a list that I haven't even looked at.
But so you're basically you're calling out to a very limited audience of looking for these reports. By using Twitter and your public Facebook page, you would be able to reach more folks and be able to have a greater reach to try to collect these stories. But now you've got the airwaves here, so let people know what it is that you're doing.
All right. I was approached by people from Animal Planet to collect local Bigfoot reports in the Bridgewater Triangle area for the television show Finding Bigfoot. They are going to be coming to the state in late summer, but they want some advanced reports so that they can use as, teasers for the episode in the state.
So let's add that to the list of TV that's interested in the Bridgewater Triangle. Because God knows.
Who isn't at this point?
There's tons of it going on right now. So let's add that into there. Now, I also want to throw out a mention, too, as well, that Amy Bruni and Adam Berry are looking for local hauntings in the Massachusetts, New England area, that if you feel like there's a loved one who's trying to reach out to you, or if you feel like whatever it is that you're dealing with is something that you can't handle, they are looking for some cases here as well. So you can reach out to them.
I have 2.
Well, let's make sure that we get it on their plate because they're still collecting stories. And so you can reach out to me if you want to do that, or you can find Amy and Adam directly. They're both very interactive on social media. So if you try to reach out to them that way, they will definitely get back to you. And Amy has put out her email address as well, but I don't have Facebook open to find the link. I will find it on Twitter. But you can absolutely 100% reach out to them on Twitter. They will see it. And they're trying to get, they're trying to help people. It's not just about being able to produce a TV show. So some of these cases that are coming in aren't going to even make it to television, aren't even going to be considered for television. But you will be able to get it into the hands of people, get your story into the hands of people that know how to connect you with people that can help you. And I've taken some of these cases that people have said, oh, well, I saw that, they're looking for these cases, they're looking for these stories, but I need help, but I don't want to be on television. And so I've been just passing those stories on to other people as well. And I've been finding there's quite a bit of people that I call on for help, but I feel like I've been dumping a lot of things on one particular person as of late. But there's teams all over that we're connected with, and we can help you find somebody. So
the link, it looks like here, is Amy at amy-bruni.net.
That seems exactly right. So there you go. Amy at amy-bruni.net. If you want to reach out to her directly, or you can pass it on to us, and we will pass it on. We certainly have, we've sent plenty of stuff their way over the past, and sometimes they send stuff our way, and it's a very good working relationship. So we can hook it up if you think that you need help. But
also, Katrina Weidman has also been posting that she does something separate besides Paranormal Lockdown. She has a team. It's Atherton Paranormal, and I've seen on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook even. She's been saying that they're looking for cases. You
gotta talk to your microphone.
If you need help, sorry.
We'll get you by the end of the night. You're gonna be a seasoned pro.
So Katrina Weidman has also been saying that her team, with 2 other people, Atherton Paranormal, is booking cases for residential and things like that. So
I'll tell you another trick too. It actually works on the side too. So as long as if you have to look, it's better to be in the front.
Okay.
But if you have to look at somebody, you can talk into the side too. I found that.
And I can pivot too.
When I'm in the news booth now, I do this so I can see the computer screen in front of me, and I'm like, oh, it works like that. I mean, I don't have to stand there like this because I might have issues.
That's a good idea.
With that position.
I think I just figured out how to do this.
There you go.
There we go. Now I can see you all and
adjust
speak clearly.
So there. See, I told you by the end of the night, season pro. But getting back to these UFO stories in this area, I posted on, they threw that story up on fun107.com and they put it up on the Facebook page. And I went underneath it and I commented that there's actually been quite a long history in this area. Now, Moniz, you've been researching UFOs around, and not even just to go all the way back to the historical, which we will, but even just in the time that you've been collecting stories over the past 30 years or so, there's been a ton of UFO sightings in the Dartmouth area.
Hundreds, literally hundreds. I remember collecting dozens and dozens of reports over SMU, which is now UMass Dartmouth. Back in the 80s, though, it was known as SMU, or Southeastern Massachusetts University. And you would get reports at least every 3 weeks, something being seen going in various directions. But now what made those interesting was they weren't just like single witness. Of course, the college campus, you have tons of people outside, and when you got a group of 5 or 6 all seeing the same thing as they're getting into their cars to take off for the night and whatever, or arriving, you got to take that seriously. Yeah, I saw this round craft with these colored lights at this height, and yeah, I saw this same thing, and they all would talk about very identifiable details that it's not misconstrued stars because they put it in a specific size at a specific location in relation to, the height of the trees and this and that. So you got to take it seriously.
Well, I mean, obviously, anybody who knows the area, that the Dartmouth area is in the flight path for the New Bedford Airport. But
correct,
the New Bedford Airport doesn't operate 24 hours a day.
No.
There's quite a bit of time when it's not operating and when nothing's landing there. I had one UFO sighting in my life that I can guarantee you was not a plane. I've seen weird stuff in the sky that I usually have been like, it's probably a plane. Like, for example, last night I was driving home from work, and I saw, about 11:30 last night, driving down Route 25, and I look out, and I saw it all the way back on 195. So, I'm driving down the road, and I see, and it's red, blue lights, but kind of going like a little bit of a circle. And then I get onto 25 and I see another one back there doing the same thing, kind of like in a circle. And I figured out pretty quickly it's probably just a couple of helicopters.
Yeah.
And they're probably using infrared, like searching for something. So I'm like, okay, no problem. But the one time that I was able to not talk myself out of what I saw, and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again very quickly. Driving home from an event at Lizzie Borden's, about 3:30 in the morning, 3:30 in the morning, driving down 195, looking out over New Bedford, and I see this weird light in the sky, and it's probably a plane because that's the flight path for the airport.
If I'm not mistaken, you gave me a phone call while driving along.
I very might have.
Yeah.
So, it's at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not a plane. So it's got my attention, and I'm watching, and I'm seeing, and it goes zip, zip, zoom, and takes off. It literally zips from like one point to another, and then goes again, and then just takes off out of sight. Faster than I've ever seen anything go.
Like horizontally?
Kind of. It was
diagonally.
It was kind of, it was more like diagonally, and then it just flew off, and it flew off in the direction of Acushnet and toward the Cape. So that's the direction that I'm traveling in. And I never saw it again for the rest of the way. And I'm looking, even though I'm trying to keep an eye on the road. But I'm also looking, and I never saw it again. And that's the only time that I've ever seen anything that I'm like, I think that was definitely unidentified. It's certainly not something that I'm going to find. And I didn't report it. I told you, but I didn't really follow up on it after that to see if anybody else had seen it. But there's a long history of things like that in this area. And to take a step back, for those who aren't familiar with the South Coast, if you bought my book, Ghosts of the South Coast, this is actually mentioned in the book, but not everybody's read it. The Round Hill area of Dartmouth. Now, if you go to Dartmouth, you folks aren't from around here, but you're from close to here,
close.
John. So, you've probably been to Dartmouth tons of times.
Yep.
And when you go, you usually go down Route 6 and you see the mall, or you might go to UMass Dartmouth or all these different areas in there. Have you ever been to the Paid Narum section?
I know exactly
where
where Paid Narum is.
So you know when you're down in that area, think of like a seaside village.
Yep.
And that's what Paid Narum is. They have a nice little bridge that goes over the bay, a little band area where they have, different civic events. And it's just a beautiful
Lots
place.
of little sailboats sitting out in the harbor.
And it's, it's money.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you get into a little bit further out, the Round Hill area. Are you familiar with the Round Hill area? You've ever been out there?
No, I don't.
The Hetty Green Estate, that big.
Oh, okay. So right before the bridge, you go right, and that goes up.
And you go all the way
Yes.
down. And if you were coming from your direction,
Yep.
you would go right.
Yep.
And so there's this big mansion.
Yes, at the end.
A little bit of history. Back in the turn of the century,
Yep.
the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, I believe, if I have my timeline right, Hetty Green was known as the Witch of Wall Street. She was the first really successful female investor. And she was very shrewd, and she amassed quite a bit of money. She was also pretty generous with her money around here. The Fairhaven Library, the Millicent Library in Fairhaven, which is haunted, even though they deny it, actually has Hetty Green's hat in the basement. But they won't. They claim they don't know where it is, and they won't let me take it out and mess with it. But anyway, so when she passed away, her son, who I can't think of his first
Green.
name, but obviously, but I can't think of his first name.
Thomas,
I'm not totally sure. I could look it up, but I don't want to get off telling the story. So he called himself a colonel. He dubbed himself Colonel Green. He had no military rank, but he was a little off, and he called himself Colonel Green. And he took over this great mansion at Round Hill, which still stands today. Now it's been turned into luxury like condos. They've kind of divided the mansion up into smaller places, but it's still the same building that they had built, that he actually had built with her fortune. So there's this big house there.
also said to have been haunted.
Right, and this whole area was already haunted even before they moved in there because there was some Native American stuff that went on that site. So he builds this big mansion and moves in and lives like a weirdo. The Charles W. Morgan, which I think some people have probably gone to Mystic, Connecticut, to Mystic Seaport, gone on the last great whaling ship, the Charles W. Morgan. They've done a fantastic job restoring it. Also haunted, has a lot of activity on it. The Charles W. Morgan sat stranded on the land at Round Hill for years. That's where they rescued it from and brought it to Mystic to rehabilitate it. It was just sitting there languishing for years because the Green family owned the ship and they just left it there. So that ghost was also there on that property. Well, Colonel Green, being a bit of a weirdo, being a bit of an eccentric, gets really involved in some of the different scientific experimentation that's been going on around that time, the early 20th century. So he allows MIT to come down and build the giant radio telescope. There used to be a telescope down there, an antenna that they called the Martini glass, a telescopic antenna that they called the Martini glass. It's since been destroyed by the people who purchased the land. But I'm sure you'd been down there or seen pictures of it. This big, they called it the Martini glass because that's what it looked like.
Big parabolic antenna.
And that was actually out there because originally Colonel Green had the first radio station in the area, and they broadcast out of Round Hill. So that's why they knew that this was the place to go and build this big antenna for the different types of experiments they were doing in telecommunications. So they build this down there. Now, this area had already had a ton of UFO reports over the years anyway, going back to the colonial times. They put this thing out there, and all of a sudden, UFOs are showing up on a regular basis. Like, you might call it a flat, Moniz, when you have all these sightings that are coming all the time. But this was something that was just a steady stream of sightings. And then what happened beyond that is, have you ever been to the Museum of Science in Boston? Mm-hmm. They have that big electrical show with the giant Van de Graaff generators. Yes. Those used to be at Round Hill. Those were built at Round Hill and then moved to the Museum of Science. So they used to have those down there conducting electrical experiments down there as well. So now you've got all of this stuff going on. Just imagine what kind of signals are being sent out to these beings from somewhere else that are zoning in on this area. So I've always been fascinated with Round Hill and what might have actually been going on there, because I almost think that if you look at the story and if you look at the eccentricity of Colonel Green, maybe he was onto something. Maybe he was in communication with something. And that's why we had all these sightings there over the years. Now, try and go knock on the door at Round Hill and ask if you can come in and look around, forget it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't even, if you drive by, you have to make a certain amount of money just to look out the window. So it's not like you can just get down. They were selling one of the big properties down there a couple of years ago. I think it's still on the market.
Over $1 million, probably.
Oh, yeah. It's the most expensive home on the South Coast.
Is that the one you see on Facebook every once in a while?
I think,
it's a big
they
white
share it
one.
around, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, maybe one of our listeners wants to go and buy that and say, hey, come on out here and conduct some experiments yourselves. But other than that, I think we're kind of going to be shut out of that neighborhood.
Tim, you could fit right in there.
Someday. Maybe someday. I would never fit in a place like that, but at least I could afford my way in someday. But that area has a long history, and it's almost like we talk about the Bridgewater Triangle and all the weird things that happen in the Bridgewater Triangle. A lot of that weird stuff has happened just in this one little area, just in this one little couple square miles, like little peninsula that's out there. So it's fascinating to me. Every time there's a report that happens in the Dartmouth, New Bedford area, it's just one more thing to chalk up to all of the stuff that's been going on there over the years. And it kind of flies under the radar.
It does.
Obviously, Moniz, you know about it, and I'm sure Maurice knows about it. But it's something that when people are putting out books about UFO sightings in America or UFOs in New England, they don't really pick up on that because people don't talk about it anymore. But it's out there. You can find it. If you go back and look, people were talking about it then. There were stories in the newspapers about it.
Well, it's kind of the same situation with the Bridgewater Triangle itself. I mean, until Warren Coleman posted it and wrote about it, nobody really knew about it. So it kind of, until people start talking about it and hearing about it, they're not going to know. And people from outside the area might not either until somebody like yourself or somebody local writes about it and it actually gets the potential listener and reader that it should.
One of the things that fascinates me about this is, Moniz, you probably remember this. Years ago, we're doing an event at Lizzie Borden's. It wasn't our event, somebody else's event. And there was a bunch of people from New Hampshire there.
Yes, I recall. You're talking like in the first year or two.
Very early on in the show. And I'm trying to think of, I want to give proper credit to the group that did it, but I can't think of their name. But they were out of New Hampshire.
Yep.
And they came down, and one of their members was a geologist, or an amateur geologist. Yep. And he had the U.S. Geological...
His name was Mike?
I think so.
Yeah.
And there was a woman on the team that I can't remember her name. I'm just totally blanking. I feel bad. Kerry was her name.
Okay.
So this team comes down, and one of the members, I don't know if he was an actual geologist or it was just a hobby, but he had the U.S. Geological Survey map of the entire South Coast area. And there's certain shadings on this map for certain types of stone that have been discovered. And the entire South Coast was just covered in whatever the color was for quartz. So this whole area is rich in quartz because of all the we have fieldstone everywhere. Mm-hmm. We have granite and all of the stuff that we have. So basically we have a giant conductor of electricity, a giant recorder of electricity. So it's not surprising then that these beings are still coming here, even if they're not conducting those experiments that were going on for all that time. The environment here probably kind of recorded some of that energy and is still holding it in. So it's still drawing these things in as a beacon.
Or you could look at it as it's conducive to their technology. It doesn't hurt their technology or whatever it is that's being used.
Do you feel, though, that does that have an impact, though? I mean, we're looking at a chicken and egg scenario, a chicken and egg question here. But does that have an impact if something is being done? So let's just say these experiments are being done that draw in the UFOs. We don't even have to explain what we think a UFO is. We don't even have to explain. Moniz and I fight about this all the time. Moniz is like, well, it's something coming from another planet. And I'm like, it's something coming from our own imaginations. Like, we'll go back and forth on this. But whatever a UFO is, if these experiments are drawing those in, is that also ripping things open enough that all these other types of paranormal phenomena take place? We know that the Bridgewater Triangle has some sort of power unto itself that makes all these things happen. But if you find a way to draw one, can you draw another? If you pull in paranormal activity, ghostly activity, you pull in ghostly responses, is it kind of par for the course and that something else might show up as well?
I don't see why not. I mean, we know that layering certain materials will generate a low electrical field. I'll give you a good example. The mound in southern England, known as Silbury Hill, that produces a 1 volt DC current just because of its construction, the way it's layered in the materials. And we have some of that same kind of principle working where we are with the various layers of quartz and other materials, and then with the water going through it, which water is also a great conductor, so we have a pretty good electromagnetic field being generated in this area just naturally from the geology.
Perfect storm.
I mean, looking at other reports, I think it's possible that, like, I almost feel like if we can figure out how to pull one in, we will figure out how to pull in others. You know, maybe not exactly to the point where we can pinpoint it, but is it going to surprise you if you are constantly going to a place that you know? Lizzie Borden's house, for example. We go there all the time. We know the place is haunted. You go there all the time. You start having these interactions. You start having these experiences. How weird is it going to be if all of a sudden one night you're leaving and a UFO flies by? Or one night you're
already had that experience.
I know, but I'm saying that.
Right.
Like, how do you know, like, if you go to Lizzie Borden's house, is it going to be weird if when you're getting in your car, all of a sudden Bigfoot walks across the street? You know, like...
In Fall River, that may still not be out of the realms of possibility, but...
I'd have to get up there and get really close and see exactly who it is. Because there's some people that might be mistaken for Bigfoot out there. Let's take a phone call, 508-996-0500. Good evening, you're on Spooky South Coast.
Hi, host. You're a lot of fun and very articulate.
Thank you.
I called once before because I slept in Lizzie Borden's Maplecroft bedroom as my sister and her husband bought that place.
The new owners.
Well, I don't know what's happened for years because my sister divorced the husband.
Okay, so we're talking back in the doobie days.
Mentioning that as
Yes. No. Okay, no problem.
Just a previous connection with you. I was supposed to see if her ghost was in that room because a little girl, my niece, saw some sort of vision of an older woman in that room. They kept empty. And supposedly the room was pretty much preserved from when Lizzie was there. But I slept in that bed, and I didn't see anything. But so I find you so interesting. The Colonel Green thing was an excellent explanation. I appreciated that. I happen to be living in one of Hetty Green's safe houses in New Bedford.
Oh, really?
It's nothing because, she was trying to prove she was poor. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, I know.
Yeah. But the more interesting thing, and I have a question at the end regarding other ghosts, but the more interesting thing is I wanted to tell you that when I was a boy in the early 60s, a UFO sighting took place above Route 88 to Horseneck Beach. You familiar with that area?
Yep.
Okay, and what had happened is a Westport police sergeant was on night duty with a colleague in a cruiser going down, headed, I guess you would say, north on 88, and a UFO hovered above the roadside about 2 or 3 a.m. at night, and was there for about 5 to 10 minutes flying in the same direction they were headed at cruise speed and freaking them both out. So what happened is these two policemen of Westport did not want to ruin their careers or reputations by even reporting it.
Right, unfortunately, that's the way, for
so
some
what
people,
happened is when the sergeant retired about 10 years later, he revealed what happened, and he had gotten his pension and moved, I believe, to Oregon. I believe so. I know his first name was William, and this was in a newspaper article. It was either in the Fall River Herald about the late 60s. The event occurred in the early 60s, and he was definitely terrified that if he had come forward to say what he saw on Route 88, he would be the victim of scorn and, laughed out of the department, his career, etc. But he did feel, after he was safe with his pension in Oregon, I believe, he did feel it was his duty to contact a reporter and tell them what had occurred. And I read the article, and I was living out on Hicks Bridge Road at that point. I'm mainly a Dartmouth person. But it was just amazing to hear the account and description. You could probably access it. It's sad the Standard Times, if it was in that one, sad they destroyed their archives.
Well, I mean, the library still has some, though, so...
well, if it was in the Fall River Herald, maybe you'd have better luck searching the 60s. But I think that is a story that should go noted, because that officer was not in the least frivolous about the entire affair.
I mean, I spoke in October. I spoke in Westport at the Masonic Lodge down there, which is like located right by that big vineyard. And I'm not somebody that's gone to Westport quite often. I usually if I do, it's my experience is limited to Route 6. But I was just telling a friend of mine who's from Westport, that place just has a feel to it, and it has an atmosphere around it that when you're driving through there at night, you look at the sky, because if you're ever going to see anything weird in the sky, that's the place.
Now, you or your guests are familiar with a lot of these things that I'm not. I just had these connections, and I like your show when I do tune in, and you guys are very entertaining and articulate, too. But let me ask you this last question. Do your fellow hosts or you expect or know anything about ghosts that might be in the area that was kind of our Barbary Coast that was torn down, Route 18, that had many historic buildings, bars, brothels, gambling houses, etc., that served, the early whalers and probably some pirates, too. And, of course, that was all gone with Route 18 destroying it. But if you're talking about ghosts, wouldn't you think there'd be possibly some, signals from that area? Or does urban renewal and complete destruction of an area forego any possible ghost residues?
Definitely not. No matter what happens to the physical structures, the spirits that are there can still remain.
Do you think there are any, or you can contact any down at the wharf?
I can give you some noted places in that area that have activity. Probably the biggest, first and foremost, and I can't speak to the activity there, but a friend of ours could, Frank Grace, the Orpheum Theater. When they were in the process of trying to refurbish the Orpheum, they had a whole organization that was dedicated to bringing it back to life, and part of that was going to include, Frank was trying to set it up for us to be able to go in there and do an investigation because so much stuff had been going on there. So that was one of the real hot spots of the area.
And now, do you have a book or a video out on the ghost? Actually, I'm more interested now in the UFO in the area. Do you have a
There's probably not a good UFO title for this area in particular. There's some UFOs of New England that might have some mentions around here, but nothing really in this area. For ghosts in this area, I know a guy that wrote a book called Ghosts of the South Coast. But that's my book that you can find at Barnes & Noble and other bookstores that really kind of covers the weird history in the ghosts. It's called Ghosts of the South Coast.
Well, I'll look for it. And may I say, all your hosts are enjoyable, and you are particularly a breath of fresh air with your humorous or semi-humorous news reports.
Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work, gang.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.
And I do, I try to put a little levity in the news, so you can tune in weekdays, noon to 8. But going back to that area, that Route 18 area. So basically, if you're not familiar with the South Coast, if you're listening, because I know we have people listening all over the world, if you look at a map of this area and you see New Bedford being right on the harbor, that whole line of New Bedford on the harbor, like Route 18 follows that now all the way to the south end. And at the south end of New Bedford, that's where Fort Tabor is. Fort Rodman, actually. But the Fort Tabor, Fort Rodman State Park is right there. And that's where we've gone there numerous times and investigated and had experiences. And I think everybody except Melody here has had something weird happen there. Mm-hmm. And going all around that coast. So right after Fort Tabor, there's I can't remember the name of the business. I think they're closing down, but they go out and when they clean out places that are getting shut down, and they keep it all up in their warehouse. It's a salvage company, but I can't remember the actual name of the salvage company. They have a floor where they just keep all the stuff. Very haunted. Now, it's probably not the building. It's probably all these items that they're bringing in from other places, but I've gotten reports from people that work there, the owner, talking about
on Brock Avenue.
I don't know. I don't think it's on Brock. I think it's what's Rodney. What's the Rodney French?
East Rodney French.
Whatever. Yeah.
West Rodney.
Whichever
French.
Rodney French goes up against the water and leads. Well, they both do. How do I explain? Well, the one that goes by Davies Locker.
I know where you're talking.
So anyway, that whole area, and then the Orpheum as you're coming back down 18, coming more toward Fairhaven, and as you go through there, that's when you're in historic downtown New Bedford, which is basically Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And the Siemens Bethel, which is in Moby Dick, is there. That's haunted. I work at the Standard Times. That building is weird. They have weird things going on. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's haunted. I've never really checked it out and investigated it, but that whole area, there's stuff that goes on. I hear, because a younger generation has moved into downtown New Bedford now. It's a place where there's a lot of hipster businesses. And so people of a younger generation are a little bit more willing to talk about this stuff. And they're saying that there's a lot of things going on down there in some of these old buildings, especially the people who live in lofts over some of these businesses, there's stuff going on. And it's almost like you can kind of trace a whole path all the way up that Route 18 area of hauntings. And then you get to, the Acushnet Avenue, the Ashley Boulevard area, and like you hit a brick wall. And why do you hit a brick wall there? My theory is that because once you get in there, you're getting into a lot of the heart of the Portuguese culture. They don't talk about it. Yeah. They won't share the stories. They don't talk about the ghosts. So I think that that's kind of, the dividing line of where you can get some of these reports from. And it's interesting that there's geographical factors, there's geophysical factors, there's sociological factors. A lot of this stuff kind of plays in, and you're peeling back layers. So on the surface, we come in here every Saturday night, and we're talking about weird stuff that happens. And we're talking about weird things that people might or might not believe. But we're also telling stories, and we're talking about things that do have an impact, that do have layers to them, and are kind of reflective of society. Like, we talk about maybe a town that has a lot of paranormal activity, or we talk about a particular location that has a lot of activity, but you just can't take it on the surface of, okay, well, 2 people were killed here, so obviously it's haunted. There's so much more than that, and it goes into so much more than that. And that's what I think we've always tried to do here, looking back, kind of reflecting on 11 years of this. We've never really just talked about things at face value. We've tried to go into the deeper and the more and the why. So that's why I think this area is perfect to have a show like ours, because this area is so rich in this stuff. I think that's why we have the audience that we do. I think people, and it always happens every year, we can do shows about anything. And with the exception of Amityville, I said it, everything's going to go haywire.
Already has.
Yeah, that's true. I already Amityville'd up this whole show from the beginning. But with the exception of Amityville, I don't think there's any topic that we cover on this show that is nearly as popular as the shows when we talk about local things. For some reason, people in other countries want to hear about South Coast ghost stories and South Coast paranormal things.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with how old the area is, too. People are so intrigued by what else could have happened in that area because of how old it is. So I wonder if that's truly got something to do with it.
And we're also not oversaturated,
This is
because
true.
one of the things that I think has been key to the way that the paranormal has developed around here is, what have you noticed? We've had very few paranormal TV shows come here. You know, there was just an article in the paper the other day, last Sunday, about the New Bedford Armory, because the city is trying to figure out what to do with the armory and what exactly should go on. And they went back and talked, I hooked up the writer with Jason Hawes, and so they talked about that. So here we are going back to 2006, talking about the investigation of the New Bedford Armory. And then it took until, there was another episode where they did a private case in New Bedford, maybe like a year or two after that. But then it took all the way until the final season before they came back and did Fort Taber, Fort Rodman. So it wasn't like this area has been focused on a lot of paranormal television shows.
And really, other than that, in this area, the only other thing that's really truly been done is the Lizzie Borden.
Right. And
that's
been
it.
done pretty much by everybody.
By everybody. But other than that, that's the only thing that's been done.
And what's funny is, not to tell tales out of school, but when I was working on Ghost Asylum, I was pushing for them to come and come to this area, and they wanted to come to this area. It didn't work out because of scheduling, because the window they had to film would have been wintertime here, and they didn't want to come in November and risk running into production delays and everything with weather. But that's the only bite that I'd really gotten from anybody about coming here and spending time in multiple locations around here. Like we've been talking about some different projects that might be coming down the pike, but still, it's not the same thing. It's still not focusing on these ghost stories around here that, I think deserve some recognition. So I think the fact that they haven't been oversaturated on TV also makes people a little bit more intrigued about them.
It'll be interesting if something ever does happen where they strictly focus on the South Coast or even the southern New England area, from Newport, Rhode Island, up to Boston, maybe that area, down along the coast. It'll be interesting.
And Cape Cod gets overlooked quite a bit.
Yep.
Sam's putting together the Provincetown Paracon. That is an area that, Derek Bartlett and his Capers team have been out there for
Many
researching
years.
stuff, but it doesn't really get a lot of attention. It doesn't get a lot of... The TV shows aren't coming and knocking down their door, and it's one of those things where you might watch Chronicle in October. They might have Ghosts of Cape Cod, but other than that, it doesn't really get a lot of play, and it's sad because the stories are out there, and the stories are great American legends.
They got some great historical locations down there that supposedly are haunted. Lighthouses, old schoolhouses. It's just surprising that nobody's gone down there.
The Inn at Duck Creek out in Wellfleet.
Which I think did make Ghost Hunters.
It may have. Andrew Lake and
I know a place in
went there.
Provincetown did.
We did a couple of investigations down there. Had some really interesting stuff happen in that. So yeah, the Cape has lots of good stuff.
So I don't know. We're kind of spoiled in a way that it hasn't been ruined by everybody putting their eyes on it. But at the same time, anybody that listens to the show knows that we're big supporters of these places and big supporters of keeping history going. And this is the way to do it, because you can't make a living anymore off, summertime tours. You can't make a living anymore and keep these places open by school kids coming on field trips.
It's funny. Jim in the chat room just said, what about Ghost of the South Coast, like Ghost of Shepherdstown? That would be awesome because there's so much history here.
It could be, and we've had those discussions. We've talked about tours. We've talked about TV shows. There's different things that have been going on, and it's possible. The problem is, the biggest problem that we have here is we don't have enough of the people that are willing to come out and talk and share these things. So it's a fight. It's a fight to get people to call in. How many times have we come on the air? 483, right, tonight? And we've probably in that time, I know people are listening. They say they're listening. They call in when we have a psychic.
They're in the chat room.
If we have a psychic on the air and we're giving away free readings, the phones are lit up the entire night from local numbers, local people. But when we say, just call in and tell us your ghost story, the phone lines go dead. We've probably gotten maybe 10 or 15 local ghost stories from callers and all the time that we've done this show. Which is a good thing that we didn't decide to make that the entire show, Matt, which was what we originally talked about. We wouldn't have lasted 11 weeks, let alone 11 years.
It's funny because just earlier tonight, I was talking to Stephanie and Melanie about this. I had a call come in to my personal phone about a case here in New Bedford. And the first thing they said, besides asking if we do investigate, was, I really don't tell this to anybody, and I'd rather keep it very, very private so people don't know and think I'm crazy.
And that's still the mindset and the mentality around here. But we'll still be here every Saturday night to talk about it. Well, not next Saturday night, because we'll be at the Zombie Prom, and you all should be too. Come on out, celebrate with us, raise some money for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. $25 if you want to get in at the door. $20 if you buy your tickets now by going to ghostvillage.com. It's happening at Jalapenos in Bellingham, so you can, go there, have some fun, and it's only like a 40-minute drive back to the South Coast. And so we hope to see you all there. Well, you probably might not see us. We're all going to be wearing zombie makeup, but we'll be there. And you can come out and hang out, and it's all for a good cause. So get your tickets now, and make sure that you show up there next Saturday night. And then we'll be back every Saturday night after that in some form or another, all the way until the Red Sox keep kicking us off. But we'll get to that bridge. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We are just about out of time tonight. I want to thank John and Melody for coming in. Melody, it was great having you do the news live and in person.
Thank you. I agree. And I do want to say something.
Got about 10 seconds.
Okay. We need to start sharing our ghost stories more, and I am a big advocate for just being honest with what's going on and just get it out there. Don't fear. People are going to judge you. It does not matter. Get your stories out there.
You can make fun of me for so much more than just my ghost stories.
Exactly.
I give you plenty of material to work with. All right, so that does it for this week's show. For Matt, for Stephanie, for Chris, for John, for Melody, I'm Tim. We want you all to stay spooktacular, and we want you all to come out next week to the Zombie Prom. Have a great week, everybody.
New Bedford's News Talk